So we have made dozens of videos covering different Valorant tips that you can use in all different elos. From high elo to low elo, we have got it all covered, but what if we made just a freaking gold mine of a video that you can just rapid fire off 50 actually helpful tips that you guys can use in your matches so that you can come out of this video instantly just feeling like a better player. That's what I'm going to do today, but to make it fun and save you guys some time, I'm going to try to do this in 10 minutes. That comes out to around one tip every 12 seconds in this video. Think I can do it? I won't be able to find out until the end of the video, but how about if I do, you guys check out SkillCapped.com. We recently published 2 brand new beginner courses over to our site that make it stupid simple to learn the game. Unlike other guides that just assume you know things, we break down the game in clear terms for brand new players so that you guys can get quickly back up to speed and climbing in no time. We believe in our courses so much, in fact, that we offer 2 guarantees to you guys who use our service. The first is that you get 2 full weeks to explore everything that we have to offer, and if it's not for you, you get your money back, no questions asked. The second guarantee though is that you will climb 5 whole divisions while using our service, or once again, you get your money back, no questions asked. We're able to do this because our service works, and there is a reason that we're the only last standing educational guide service in Valorant after 5 years. Because people just love our product. So if you really want to see some gains this hack, be sure to check out SkillCapped, and other than that, let's get into our tips. Editors, feel free to start the clock now. You can drop down zip lines silently and quickly by walking off of them, holding shift, and then pressing F right before you hit the ground. Cool little trick. I mentioned this in the last video too, but to go up zip lines, you want to press the direction that you'll exit the zip line. And same thing goes for going down them. This can let you look different directions while using a zip line, which can be helpful, especially on icebox. You can silently scale up ramps quickly as well by running into them first and then holding shift as you bunny hop. Bunny hopping isn't really as beneficial as it might be in other games, but it can be nice for stuff like this. And to bunny hop easily, you can rebind your jump key to scroll wheel up. Now, when jumping, if you use your scroll wheel, it'll make sure that you'll always jump right as you hit the ground, allowing you to keep your momentum. You can boost players on top of boxes by jumping into them as they jump and press crouch. This could take some practice, but it's nice to know. ADS gets a bad rap, but it genuinely increases your first shot accuracy of your rifle. If you're fighting long ranges with the Vandal, it's absolutely worth it to ADS, otherwise generally just try to avoid it. Similarly, in the settings, you can change your snipers between hold and toggle settings. Personally, hold settings on snipers just feels a lot faster to me, so that's what I prefer. Now, everyone should have their map settings so that they can see all parts of the map. Copy these settings on screen if you don't know what to use. The most important part is just to keep have player center turned off. But after the nerfs to pings, it can actually be pretty helpful to swap your map to rotate. This way you can see which direction you're aiming more easily and use that to spam the spike if you get smoked off. Sometimes on defense, it can be hard to know when to use abilities. A simple rule that I always like to use is the simple trigger and response rule. To do this, all you need to do is wait for the enemy to use some form of utility on an execute, and then you'll respond by using your utility of your own. Generally, they're not just going to walk into sight dry, so this can work really well. The game becomes a lot easier once you realize how important trading teammates is. Basically, as long as you have a teammate in front of you, you shouldn't ever be first contact. This can give you a lot more confidence to move quickly, knowing that you are not likely to be the one in danger. It could take some time to learn, but you should try not to assume that you can take areas of the map without using some form of utility in Valorant. Try to dedicate things like drones, flashes, slows, or stuns to help your team push up safely, rather than hoping that the enemy team doesn't peek you. In high elo, they refer to this as scaling. Another rule that I introduce to students is our higher lower rule. It's meant to help you know when to play aggressive or play more passively with teammates. If you have more people alive than an enemy team, you play safe. If you have less people alive, you play more aggressive. It's not always right, but it's a good rule when learning the game. There are some other rules like this as well. For example, when running a split, generally you want to split your team with 3 people pushing mid and the other 2 pushing main. This is because going mid can be slightly more dangerous and require more players. Additionally, you normally want the spike to go towards main so that you don't risk losing it in the middle of the map. Or when running fakes, generally you need at least 3 players on your team to sell a fake. Otherwise, it's likely the enemy team won't bite. These are all arbitrary rules that aren't always true, of course, but they normally are. You can see on your minimap all of the enemies who can hear you when you're running by looking at the sound circle around your character. Anyone inside this circle will be able to hear you if you make noise. You can also use the same trick to your advantage by pre-positioning yourself in key spots around the map to listen for footsteps at the start of rounds. This way you can get an early warning on if enemies are there at the start of the round. On defense, rotating through mid can be very beneficial since it'll limit the options for the attackers. If you're worried about lurkers, this is a great way to clear them out and buy your team some space rather than rotating through spawn and giving them the chance to catch you off guard. There are a lot of different crosshairs that you can use, but there are some tricks that might be worth trying. Some people like Shroud have said to prefer crosshairs with a larger offset because it makes it as simple as putting your crosshair in the general area and shooting, rather than fixating on getting that exact pixel lined up. Other players tend to favor dot crosshairs or crosshairs with smaller offsets as it lets them know the exact moment that they're on target. You can also play with colors a bit more to find one that works for you. Colors like green, white, and cyan are generally the most favored. There is some science revolving around colors. Red is supposed to be one of the colors that is easiest to see for your eyes, so if you struggle with losing track of your target, it may be worth trying. You may want to also take a look at your enemy's outline colors. I feel like I see most pros using yellow outlines, but you have a few options for this worth trying. I've used them all, and I feel like I play better with yellow, but these things are going to be personal preference. Most new players have horrible sensitivity settings. A good general rule is that you want to make sure that one swipe of your mouse is around at a 180-degree turn. Most of your fights will take place in front of you you anyway, so you don't need to do more than that. Speaking of settings, if you're playing a duelist like Reyna, you may want to consider rebinding your dismiss button to something more accessible. By default, it's placed as E, which means that you'll have to lift your pointer finger off of your movement keys to press it. This is less than ideal, but it's more apparent with Jet's dash since it'll make it harder for you to dash to your right. You can set up character-specific profiles in your settings as well, so if you favor a specific button or maybe don't like the original keybinds for abilities, this is a great way to swap them. Back to some more game-related tips though. Oftentimes when you're getting completely run over in games, the enemy team is actually playing way faster than they should be. If their duelists are running ahead of their initiator's utility, you can oftentimes just post up with your teammate and wait for them to run into you. Pick up your free kills and shut down their push. Generally, the Sentinel's role in defense is to hold space for your team while they make a play somewhere else. If your team is fighting in front of your Sentinel's utility, it essentially loses all of its value. Try to instead let your Sentinel do their own thing and then fight somewhere else. Initiators, on the other hand, are the ones that you really want to play with. These guys' main role is to help their duelist fight. I feel like every time I play Initiator in Ranked, my duelists are running away from me, but ideally the duelist is paired up with the Initiator most rounds and fighting with them. This is a really easy way to make the enemy team want to rage quit. Ultimates are a very important part of the game, and pro teams will literally cycle ultimates every round to make sure that they have always got something big coming up. Try to make sure if you have a strong ult, you're grabbing ultimate orbs or planning the spike. It can go a long way. A lesser practiced way to gain ultimate orbs as well is by farming ecos. A lot of the time your teammates are just going to run it down to kill that last guy in a 5v1, but realistically, if you have a strong ultimate, you really do want to track that guy down just so you can get one step closer to your ult. It's really difficult to just react to abilities as they come, so the best players actually just anticipate them before they happen. Things like Sova recons, flashes, Reyna blinds, and ultimates can be expected by just looking at who is on the enemy team. If you're trying to hold for post plant, maybe try pre-aiming the spot where Sova has been darting. This will guarantee that you kill it before it pings rather than having to react to it in the moment. When coordinating with teammates, the timing of your utility is really important. A Sova dart alone isn't too scary, but if you combo an Omen blind with it, the blind makes it so the enemies can't really shoot the dart in time, basically doubling the value of the utility. You want to combo your utility whenever possible to get the best effect out of it. Similarly, the timing of different abilities is also really important. If you dart super early when your team can't really do anything with it, it's basically useless. Ideally, your dart is landing right as your team is pushing in, so the enemy has to choose between shooting the dart or shooting your teammates. One of the strongest setups that you can do in the game is a standard crossfire. All this basically means is that both players will take contact on the enemy at the exact same time. This makes it so the enemy has a 0% chance of isolating their gunfights, which makes it a super effective strategy for securing a 2v1. A close second to this setup is the swing off me setup, where one player will hold for contact, and immediately when they take contact, the second player will swing. During these setups, it's very important that the swinging player doesn't swing first, since generally the player holding won't be able to fight off of them. You would be surprised at how often players will mess these setups up, but they're both very effective ways of securing rounds. Now, smokes are considered neutral utility, which can equally impact either team depending on how they are placed. Generally, when placing smokes, you want them to be flushed in a doorway to prevent your opponents from isolating fights with them. If they are sticking out too much, your opponents could potentially use them as cover to give them an upper hand in a fight. Another mistake that players make with smokes is cutting off their teammates from the rest of the team. A common example would be doing a split on A-side ascent. You wouldn't want to do a normal tree smoke. This cuts off the cap players from the main players and causes issues. Instead, place it further back into garden to leave the path open. Most people know that you need to stand still while shooting in Valorant, but ironically, you also don't want to be standing too still. It's very important that you're abusing things like dead zoning and counter strafing when playing to keep yourself mobile. Practice these things in the range and check out our Movement God course if you really are struggling with it. It'll help you improve this much easier. With the Vandal, you can get away with actually just tap firing and aiming for headshots, but with the Phantom, you really want to practice firing off at minimum 2 bullets when you shoot. This is because the Phantom will only hit for 140 at some ranges to the head, so you'll always need that second bullet to finish your target off. Similarly, some guns also have different nuances to them. I found that when using things like the Odin or shotguns, it's generally better to aim for neck level instead of the head. For the Odin, this is because it'll kick up real fast. For shotguns, it's because the bullet spread will fill the circle on your screen, so you want to make sure that you're putting as much of the enemy in the circle as possible. This gets mentioned a lot, but people still mess it up. Whatever direction you're facing when you're planting the spike is where it'll get planted. So if you're facing a corner, it'll give the defenders less room to defuse from. Or if you're facing a sage wall, it will actually break the sage wall. It is a small but important detail. Also, a major low elo mistake that we see is that you really want to plant the spike in a spot where you can see during post plant. For example, this plant on Abyss is very bad. Sure, it's safer to plant here than below Heaven, but you also can't see it from anywhere during the post plant, so the defenders can defuse it safely. You will lose dozens of rounds due to this mistake. There are exceptions to this tip, but honestly, most times in ranked, you should rotate as soon as your teammates hear noise. Now, if the enemy team starts selling fakes, lurking, or you're the sentinel for your team, this obviously isn't always true, but hey, until they show you that they're going to lurk or sell fakes, just assume they're not. Most teams in ranked just slam sites, so rotating fast is a great way to counter this. By far the most common feedback that we provide to players is to limit their agent pool. Pretty consistently, people will ask why they're not climbing, and then you click their tracker and you see they literally play 20 different agents. If you really want to climb, you've got to learn to specialize. Pick 1 or 2 agents and main them. Stop making it hard on yourself. Lineups can be really helpful to learn depending on the agent that you play, but not in the way that you're probably thinking about them. Having an execute lineup for agents like Vice, Sage, Killjoy, or really any other agent can be really helpful to impact the execute while you're pushing in, rather than just running into sight with 2 strong abilities in your pocket doing nothing. It can be tough to find good times to look up in your map, but there are plenty of moments during the game where you won't really need to be looking at your screen. When you're planning the spike, when you're using utility, or when your knife is out, during all of these moments, you can't shoot, so just look at the map. You don't gotta see what's on screen nearly as much, so this is when you gather info safely and plan out your next move. When peeking into the enemy, it is pretty important that you give yourself enough room to get a good strafe in. This is mostly a culprit if you're peeking at an angle with a wall behind you, since the wall can cut off your strafe. For example, when pushing out a garage into Seaside Haven, you may want to hug the wall to your right first to give yourself enough space to strafe into this fight. This is a difficult thing to learn for people because you generally want to be as far away from the angle that you're peeking to reduce the amount of angle advantage your opponent has. Generally, the person who is furthest away from the angle will have an advantage in the gunfight. This game is really repetitive, so it's good to try to pick up on patterns. Although it might be a different player every game on Jet players tend to do the same things because it's what the agent is good at. Similarly, you should look to practice the same things in your matches as well. You don't need to reinvent the game every single match, just find a couple tactics that work for you and try to perfect them. You only need 13 rounds to win the game, so having 13-ish plays on every map that are normally good for a kill is really all you need to start hard carrying your matches. And that's time. Did I do it? Did I get 50 tips in 10 minutes? Remember our deal if I did. You gotta check out SkillCapped using that exclusive discount link below. If you are truly serious about improving at Valorant, our site is by far the best place to start. If you don't climb at least 5 divisions using our service, then you are going to get your money back, no questions asked. This means that you have absolutely everything to gain and nothing to lose. Thanks for watching everyone, and we will see you in the next one.